All right. Hello and welcome to the Den. My name is Eric, and it's Friday, March 27th. This is interview week here on Men of the Den, and I am here with my friend Casey Scott, who is part of the Movie Podcast TV edition, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about that. And would you call yourself a porn historian?
I would, but I mean I'm called that anyway. For more when I promote myself, I like to say adult film historian because it sounds classier. But then people say, well, adult films meaning what? And I said it's porn, basically. It's porn. It's hardcore porn. So yeah. So
Right
either one
on.
works for me, right?
All right. Well, awesome. Adult film historian Casey Scott. Welcome.
Yeah.
Is this your first time
Thank you.
on Men of the Den?
Yes, it is. I was very honored when you asked me. I was like, yes, let's do this. What fun! Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, well, let's talk about porn.
Yeah.
You are the curator of a film series called In the Flesh, and how many times has that series run?
It was a quarterly series. We did one every quarter. We started in December of 2013, and then we continued every 4 months to do one. Right now we're on hiatus, but we're going to be coming back either in the summer or the fall with sort of a larger edition with more movies, more guests, more fun stuff. So.
Bigger and longer and
Right. Bigger, longer, more uncut. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
fantastic.
it's going to be great.
So, what was the inspiration to start an adult film retrospective series?
It actually happened because there's a theater in New York called Anthology Film Archives, and that's where the series takes place. And they are really known for their really edgy, out-of-the-box programming. And so they had programmed some series of some softcore sex exploitation films from the 60s and 70s. And so I approached them and said, well, it seems like you're going progressively down the line of the history of sex and cinema, and the next logical step is to do a hardcore porn series. Would you be interested in doing something like that? And they said, well, we'd like to. We just don't know that much about the genre. We don't know what films are available, what prints are available. So I said, well, that's kind of my thing. So I'd love to help you. And they just said, okay, go nuts. And, we had a meeting, picked films. The only stipulation was that they had to be on 35 millimeter. And or 16 millimeter. They had to be on film, on celluloid, and they had to have special guests in attendance to kind of give it social and cultural significance. So they could so it's not like they're just screening porn for a bunch of yo-yos in New York. It's like it has to tie into the history of film and American pop culture. So we did the first series, and it just blew up. We got coverage in the New York Times, the New York Post, the Wall Street Journal, and it was kind of a major thing. And so every 4 months, we kind of tried to one-up ourselves with more guests, more movies that push the envelope. Yeah, it's done very well, thankfully. I mean, it could have been a huge bomb, but people love porn, so.
Who doesn't love porn?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, what would you say is your biggest accomplishment in producing this adult film series? Like, was it like a big guest star or like a special movie that means something to you? Like, what's the one big thing that like sticks in your heart?
There were two big ones that I thought, well, let's do a top three. Okay, and I'll keep it brief. In our first series, we did a movie called Through the Looking Glass, and that's one of my all-time favorite films. It's kind of a psychological horror film with sex in it. And it was made by a director named Jonas Middleton, and we flew him up from North Carolina. He'd never appeared publicly with the film, and so it was a packed house, and seeing that on 35 millimeter was, for me, amazing. And then doing the Q&A with the director was kind of, a high point in my life. There's also another movie that we showed called Roommates, which was made by Chuck Vincent, who was a gay man who made straight porn. And so his films really had kind of a campy sensibility and a distrust of heterosexual relationships. So his films are really kind of have a dark edge to them. So Roommates, that was we had the most guests we'd ever had. We had it's a film starring 3 women who were roommates. We had 2 of the roommates. We had the cinematographer, we had the writer, we had the costume designer, and so we had this huge panel of people, and then we had other people in the audience who'd worked with Chuck. So it was like a huge class reunion of Chuck Vincent people. It was really great and moving because a lot of people missed Chuck. He died of AIDS in 1991 or 92. So that was fun. And the third one was the last screening we did was a movie called Joy, starring Sharon Mitchell, and it's directed by the director credited is a guy named Harley Mansfield. And there was always the theory that Harley Mansfield was Chuck Vincent, who's no longer with us. Well, through connections with another guest who'd previously appeared with the series, we learned that it was a Hollywood director who only made 1 adult movie. And he contacted me and said, I'd kind of like to appear as Harley Mansfield, just don't tell anyone who I am. I'd like to see the audience reaction. I'd like to see it on film. So we flew him out from Los Angeles and had him do do a screening. And so he kind of came out as Harley Mansfield. So that was pretty major to have somebody finally acknowledge their porn past after working successfully in Hollywood in any way, in a public way. That's pretty major. So. Yeah, those are my top 3 series highlights, I think. Yeah.
All of those are super, super cool. So, I mean, obviously, this is a gay podcast that we're doing here at Men of the Den, but the films that you're showing in the series are predominantly heterosexual porn films. So, have there been gay porn films in the series as well?
No, and Anthology expressed interest in doing a gay porn series, and I've always wanted to do one. The problem is, sort of like, in real life, we're the minority. And so where the straight films were made, there were a lot of prints made, there were a lot of theaters to screen them. With gay porn films, the print count was less. There were many fewer theaters in the United States to show them. So trying to find prints of movies that I'd like to show is difficult, and also finding guests who are still alive, as morbid as that sounds, is also just as difficult. So I would like to do that at some point. There is a rights holder who has prints. We just need to kind of figure out what prints he has, and then figure out potential guests, maybe some scholars who write about porn, which those do exist. But yeah, I'd love to do a gay porn series. It'd be great. Yeah.
Fantastic. So what's the next big plan for In the Flesh?
There are 2 potential series that I want to do, and they're kind of up in the air. We're trying to figure out which is the most financially feasible. We kind of want to do a Superstars series or a retrospective of a specific director, and we're just trying to figure out the director for the auteur series and the Superstars. There are lots. Word of mouth is spread in the industry about the screening, so they hear that our sponsors take very good care of the guests. They pay for their hotel and lodging and appearance fees, and they have a good time. They get to reconnect with people from their past. A lot of people come out of the woodwork who are kind of in the closet about having done porn in the past, but they'll come out to see their friends. So yeah, those are the two options. Are kind of like a Superstars, like come meet Seika or Serena or Ron Jeremy, or an auteur series. I'm edging towards the auteur series just because I'm a film nerd. So I'd like to see a director's work in succession and follow their progress as a filmmaker. But I also love being able to see fans interact with these major stars of 70s and 80s porn that are able to come out and interact with their fans. So.
Awesome. Either one of those sounds amazing. So good luck.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit. You also are a regular commentator on the Movie Bears podcast TV edition. So how did you get involved with Movie Bears?
I got involved with Movie Bears. There's a guy named David Wright who is in Texas, and he does the Underbears, I think is the Underbears podcast. And so he, the gay bear podcast world is very small, so I think everyone kind of knows everyone and knows of each other at least. And so he had heard that they were, they started out as the Movie Bears podcast, and he had heard that they wanted to branch out into a TV version. And so he knew that I was interested in talking with and sharing my opinions about pop culture and media. And so he suggested me to to the co-hosts, and we did our first episode, which is about Breaking Bad, the finale, and we spent the whole time talking about Breaking Bad. And we've been doing it for it'll be about 1.5 years, I think, and so yeah, as we can, because unlike movies, like TV, there aren't new TV shows that premiere every week, so it kind of becomes difficult to keep things fresh and interesting and reintroduce new subjects to the show. But yeah, it's fun.
Cool. So from this last 1.5 years of covering like television and talking about television, what are some of the big shows that you either really loved or really hated?
Gosh, the big shows that I really loved that we've talked about. Breaking Bad. Well, actually, doesn't even count because we started covering it as it ended. So and it's tough to top that show. Looking, R.I.P. was one of my favorites. Masters of Sex we covered, which I love that show. Worst shows, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Sorry, I know people love that show. I've never, and it's apparently gotten better. I just don't have. There's too many other shows for me to watch to play catch up with a show that went downhill within the first 5 episodes, and so that was a bad one. Finding Bigfoot, I think, was another one that we covered. It was a reality show, a competition show about finding Bigfoot, and it was fun. But and we had a special guest. We had one of the contestants as a special guest. Yeah, reality shows aren't my favorite. I like stuff like Catfish and Shark Tank, but and Survivor and Drag Race, and that's kind of it. Yeah.
Have you guys been covering Drag Race this season?
No, and you know what? I think it's probably for the best because I don't know. It's kind of. I think we all kind of feel like, if we all don't feel strongly about a show, it's just all of us, the 3 of us, bitching about a show, and that's not fun to listen to unless it's a widely believed that the show's terrible. I remember we got a lot of flack when we were down on The Walking Dead when it was in one of its low points a little while ago, and people were like, you're crazy. The show's great. You're crazy. And it got back up, so now we're kind of in love with it again. But every show has its peaks and valleys, except for stuff like Breaking Bad, which is almost always perfect. Yeah.
That's true. I mean, like, of all the shows, I felt like Breaking Bad had like a Shakespearean quality ending.
Yeah.
It was probably the most perfect ending of a television show I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was great, and then it's kind of difficult because, I mean, you think about all these other shows that have endings that Dexter had an ending that people hated. Sopranos, the jury's still out on whether that ending was perfect, but Breaking Bad really went out beautifully. And when Mad Men ends in a matter of weeks, we'll have to see if that goes out well too. And I wish we were covering that on the show. I think I'm the only one that watches that like obsessively. So.
Yeah, you mentioned Looking, and they just announced that it got canceled. I'm sure you're probably going to be talking about that on Movie Bears. That you were a big supporter of Looking, and I was not really all that into it. Now, I like Andrew Hay. I like his work. I liked Weekend and all that. That was a wonderful movie, but I felt like Looking was really drawn out, and I couldn't get into it. I didn't find a hook into it. But what was it for you that made Looking work?
I liked Looking from the first episode because I liked the fact that it was focusing on a batch of characters, and I went into it, with hesitation because the last, mainly queer-focused show was Queer as Folk, and I really was not a fan of Queer as Folk, and I think Looking worked for me because where Queer as Folk seemed like a very extroverted kind of show. It was about being out and loud and being the party gays, sort of. Looking wasn't really like that. It was kind of like, let's hang with my friends and smoke pot and just talk, shoot the shit and talk about our lives. And it's kind of the show for like gay introverts, I guess. Which seems like a sweeping generalization, but comparing those two shows, that's kind of what I came away with when I thought about them. But I saw a lot of myself in all three of the characters. There was something in each of them that I could identify with. So that's why it drove me nuts when people were like, "Oh, these characters are so unlikable." But then they would watch Girls every week. It's just like you can't watch shows like Girls and How to Get Away with Murder and all these other shows where there are no likable characters whatsoever, and then complain about looking because you don't like any of the characters. I mean, I thought it was compelling enough, but obviously I was in the minority because it got canceled. So
Right.
But I do agree. I can see why some people would have problems with the pacing and some of the storytelling because it did take its time, and that's not necessarily the best thing for a TV show of that nature. Especially if you're going to have a limited amount of episodes, something major has to happen every episode.
Right, and I think that's kind of what dogged it. I mean, HBO has really short-run series, and you only get a few episodes, 6 to 10 episodes in a series, and so it didn't have enough time to get to a build, I felt.
Right. I agree.
So, is there anything that you've heard rumors about, like TV-wise, that you're looking forward to?
I just heard that two networks were going to be doing two versions of series about the Underground Railroad, and I thought that sounded really intriguing. Like, I'd love to see that. That sounds great. That was the most recent piece of news I heard that made me really excited. Entertainment Weekly just did a story on like the best upcoming fall shows that might happen, but they must not have made an impression because I don't remember any of them. But I kind of am at a place where I think TV's at a really good place right now. I think there's a lot of really good stuff. There's a lot of bad stuff, but the good. It's kind of even, like, if you're looking for good quality television, you're going to find it. It's not like you're going to have to wade through a lot of stuff. It's actually pretty easy to find, which was not the case like 10 years ago, where it was very rare to find a show that like blew your mind every week.
And now we have like new shows on Netflix and Hulu that are all going in new directions and covering new ground. There's a lot of really cool stuff out there.
Yeah. Well, Netflix is blowing my mind, and Transparent on Hulu. I'm like, when's season 2 coming on? I'm like, let's get this going. I love this cast. Yeah.
Oh, they're on Amazon.
Oh, they're on Amazon. Then what is it? I don't watch anything on Hulu then. I don't think.
I keep up with regular TV on Hulu.
That's exactly what I use it for. And sometimes like older TV shows, like I'll watch Taxi on there and stuff like that. I think Roseanne's on Netflix now, but yeah. Yeah,
my husband has been basically like streaming South Park nonstop through Hulu.
That's we can't go wrong with that show.
Nah.
That's another show that it's been on forever and it still kind of delivers. They know what they're doing. They got it down to an art.
True. Yeah, absolutely true. All right, just a couple last things. So you and I are also part of a little horror movie fan club, and one of the things that came out of that, I mean, like I think you and I and Dave are probably top 3 commentators on the Movie Bear Club, horror bear club. But you got me to watch Suspiria by Dario Argento.
That went bad.
I wasn't totally into it, but I've been thinking about it more and more, and about like the color blocking and stuff like that. And, but tell me again why Suspiria is your movie.
Suspiria is my movie. I mean, part of it is sentimental. I mean, I rented it at Spotlight Video in Fairfax on the Magnum Home Video Edition big box that Bill Lustig, who now runs Blue Underground, oversaw that transfer and everything. And I remember watching it at 3 a.m. and just being like on the edge of my seat and like, what is happening here? And then when I loved it from the get-go, and then when I finally saw a nice, clean version of it, it blew my mind even more. I think what I love about it is, I've always been a sucker for really dark kind of fairy tale things, because when I was a kid I loved stuff like Legend and Return to Oz and Neverending Story, like kids movies that are really very adult. And so Suspiria has that feel to it. It's very much a fairy tale. There's even it's a house in the woods with witches in Germany. So it's like a Grimm's fairy tale with outrageous gory deaths and a pounding score, and the whole thing just really works for me. But I could see why it wouldn't work for everyone, because it's not, story is really not important, acting is not important. It's really mostly about style. Yeah, I felt really bad because I think I raved about it in the group, and I think a few people, I know you did, and someone else, a few other people did, and they were just kind of like, it wasn't that great. I said, oh God. I was like, hang my head in shame. I was like, okay, I'm not. It's the whole thing with Italian horror. Like, Italian horror, you can't recommend to everybody because it's not. It sounds potential that you have to get into, and it's really not for everybody. It took me a long time to get into it, to be honest. And then something just clicked, and it just kind of stuck with me.
Right on. Any horror movies like currently out or forthcoming that you are looking forward to?
Yeah, I really want to see It Follows, which I think there was a group outing that I missed out on, and I think to go see that, and I was really bummed. I completely forgot about it. I do want to see that. I loved You're Next, which came out last year or the year before, and You're Next completely blew my mind. And that had one of the best Scream Queen heroines ever. Like that's the one thing that I will say about horror films, and I always get into arguments with feminists who hate horror films, and it's like, oh well, they exist to see women butchered. I mean, that's true for some, but it's kind of the same argument for porn. I mean, you can't make the argument for porn that it exists just to see women degraded. I mean, it doesn't work that way. There are examples in both cases, and horror films are the same way. There are plenty of horror films with incredible women that like kick major ass, and they will not be taken advantage of, and they will not go down without a huge fight. And that Your Next was just perfect. I loved it.
I completely agree with that. And you know what? You are going to love It Follows. Like, the whole vibe of that movie, it's awesome. It's so great.
It sounds like, reading about it, I'm just like, this sounds like, the film people who made it sounds like they've seen a lot of 80s slasher films and a lot of films that have to deal with the topic of sexuality and horror, and they probably read Carol Clover's book, and have understood like the role of sexuality in horror films and women in horror films. And so I thought, wow, this just sounds really smart on paper. I can't imagine how it's going to play out. So I am also excited. I cannot wait for Guillermo del Toro's new movie. And I forget the title of it, but Pan's Labyrinth was one of my favorite films of all time. And I know Pacific Rim came out and people had positive reviews to say about it, but I was like, let's get back to something a little more personal, Guillermo. Like Devil's Backbone was amazing, and so his new movie looks incredible.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that we've covered a lot, actually.
Yeah, we have.
But I need to find something to eat, and I'm going to let you go because you got to get ready for Movie Bears. So thank you.
I do. Yeah. Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, and to the viewer, we have one viewer today. And for all of you that are going to watch this video tomorrow, please make sure to like Men of the Den. We're on Facebook and YouTube. You can subscribe to us on YouTube if you want to see more videos like this. And you can comment on this video. You can ask questions to me. And Casey, you might want to pop in and see if there's any questions for you on this when it comes out. And I'll send you the link. And I will see you all guys next week. Cheers.